I welcome councillors, officers and members of the public to the meeting of the Strategy and Resources Committee this morning. Please switch off your mobile phones or put them to silent. There are members of the press, together with officers from internal and external auditors attending this meeting virtually. Can I please ask those attending virtually to switch off your microphone to avoid any disruption during the meeting. The meeting is being recorded and will be available in due course on the council YouTube channel. A reminder for councillors to ensure that those attending virtually can hear the proceedings, and for the recording to capture the entire meeting, please ensure that you project your voice and speak clearly. Please remember it's a formal meeting and therefore do not refer to each other by first names. Yes, I'll try and remember that last part. The other couple of things I wanted to mention is, could you please just remain behind at the end of the formal meeting? We have something we would like to discuss with you afterwards. And with your indulgence, members, I would like to move one of the items to much earlier on the agenda. That is item 12, because we have Terry Elliott here this morning who would like to address the council. So we will start the agenda then. Apologies for absence, please.
Yes, Chair, apologies for absence received from Parsons, Lord Parson Yaxley.
Thank you very much. To approve as correct record the minutes of the meeting held on the 5th of September, pages 7 to 18. Can I have a mover, please? Thank you. Is there a seconder? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Anyone you abstaining?
I want to allow me to contribute. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So that's carried. Items brought forward, which I've already mentioned. So we move on to item 4, declarations of interest, please.
Yes, Chair, I've received a declaration of interest from Parsons Kidston in item 12, Bickerston site, as a founding member of the Community Land Trust.
Thank you. Okay, item 5, to agree the agenda between part A and part B. Well, we haven't got a part B, so that's very straightforward. So I suggest then, members, that we go please to pages 263 to 268, which is the Bickerston nursery site, please. And I'll hand over to you, please, Hannah.
Thank you, Councillor. Good morning, councillors and officers. Firstly, I would say that this report has been prepared by the property team, but we have had input from Jeremy's housing team with regards to the report and the housing elements within that report. Members will be familiar, I hope, with this site. It's been brought to committee and the market a number of times. The last time in January 2021, when a report was brought in respect of the factory offer we had on the site, that offer subsequently fell away and the land still remains unsold and vacant. With this in mind, during the summer of 2021, Lord Devon Council were made aware of a funding opportunity with Wonderbook Estate to release funds from the Brownfield Land Release Fund for self and custom build units. Our funding bid was successful for the Bickerston Nursery, and we received £500,000 towards infrastructure costs to open the site for self and custom builds. This funding, as we'll be aware, is time sensitive and needs to obtain the output of 15 residential units on the site. So that's an aerial shot of Bickerston with another one showing the access from Doonway. And that's the title plan. Once we received the funding, initially officers were anticipating undertaking the primary infrastructure works and then releasing individual sites to the market at less than market value and as individual plots. I think it's important at this point to understand the challenges with the site and why it's not being delivered by the market. There are back roofs in the existing building and a back flight path east to west across the site. There's a blanket TPO on the site. All this really relates to two significant trees on the peripheral middle of the site. There's drainage issues and there's topographical issues. Slight slate breakthrough from these to this. I'll show you some visuals demonstrating this here in a moment. The original extant planning consent on the site was for 15 detached units, and this was the basis we used for the funding bid to get those 15 units output. We consulted with colleagues who are part of one public estate team. There's a great challenge in delivering self and custom build projects. And this challenge persists with the Bickerson Nursery site. Failure of the market to deliver it, and even with the funding, it's still a complex project. In order to find the right delivery mechanism for the site, we consulted with Igloo Regeneration. We ran a co-creation workshop with Igloo and had attendance from neighbours, officers, members and the CLT. What came out of this process would be something that I refer you to in the report, 4.4. It's well known that there's a housing crisis in Ward 7. Ilfracombe has the added complications of having high numbers of second homes in holiday let, low levels of affordable housing stock, zero new affordable homes since 2006-2007, the viability issue on the town's allocated strategic extension site resulting in just 10% of affordable housing, poor quality housing with a small amount remaining private rented sector properties. So through the process of the co-creation workshop, we identified an opportunity to work with the Community Land Trust and their partners to develop a custom build scheme which will support the needs of the town. While the conversations with the CLT have progressed, to safeguard the delivery dates, we instructed local architects with Smith to come up with a hybrid planning application. I'll share some sites in this respect. So you'll see there, this is the draft site plan showing achieving 15 units plus retaining the existing building on the site. That meant moving the entrance slightly north to accommodate that vehicular entrance. I'll move on. This is the site from the entrance. You'll see the existing building there on the right-hand side. The tree with the TPO is in the middle there, with the other one on the right-hand side. And you see the slope of the site and the topography issues that we're having to face. That's the southwest corner. That's the top terrace. That shows the pedestrian access into the lane, which will link down to Bickerson Park. I think this slide, which is from the top corner, shows that the issues with the top of possibly on the site and those changing levels of makes it a big challenge to deliver. So as I said, the architects will enable the scheme to retain the existing building, but in order to reach the required level of output, some elements need to be terraced, and that's why it makes it a challenge to deliver on the self and custom build basis. And it strengthens the need to work with the CLT to deliver a custom build scheme where local residents would have the opportunity to be involved from the outset. We have looked at the potential to retain the existing building and perhaps a number of sites for direct sale to the market by the council. But this is likely to frustrate the delivery of the project and we put a risk to the council in that there isn't any financial benefit when we consider the resource implications involved. So in order to deliver this project and enable community development in this long-standing vacant site, we recommend a freehold transfer of the site to the Community Land Trust. The council will employ the Brownfield Land Release funding to instigate the initial infrastructure works. The freehold transfer will then into the CLT to support and deliver the funds required outputs. Final capital C to be agreed between the parties. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Do you want to speak first?
Yeah, do I have to read through it? That's why or can I just sit quietly in the back? I'm happy to speak to it.
The advice is that yes, you can speak as a member of the public, but it's best to leave the room to the deliberations and.
We have a member of the public here. Is it not a lot for me to leave the member of the public? The member of the public to speak?
It's just the impression that they're having a councillor there might have on the committee that's the reason that it's done.
Thank you. That's very clarification. I wouldn't mind just a few words really. I think Helen has explained the problem to the site very well. The Community Land Trust, I mean, the reason I'm on the Community Land Trust is because I've really wanted to bring forward housing to meet the needs of the people in North Devon. And it's my surprise to be found sitting here, talking to district council about their transfer of that land. Personally, I think, it is a challenge. I think it's one that we're prepared to rise to, as a CLT. I think that, I would hope that you would consider it. Because as much as anything, it would be a positive reflection on district council as well as on the CLT, which is also the way forward to make sure that housing now is social in perpetuity, which seems to be the way things are going. Anyway, I should have to leave the room.
Thank you very much. Right, now we have an unusual situation that we have somebody to address us from the public. Terry, if you'd like to, I'm just wondering, we're not normally in this sort of configuration, so I'm not sure where you would like to come to speak to us, but it'd be good if you could come to the front here somewhere.
It's close to the speaker then.
Yeah, that's right.
But just
You can speak out if you want. If you-
Carrie?
one of those will be fine.
Firstly, thank you members for giving me the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning. My name is Terry Elliott and I am a member of Ilfracombe Community Land Trust. I'm here today excuse me, to ask you to support the proposal that the trust be given ownership of the land at Bigglescombe Nursery in order to draw down funding in partnership with Astor Housing Association to custom build 15 to 17 homes for social affordable rent in perpetuity. When the Ilfracombe Community Land Trust began over a year ago, it was as a response to the housing crisis that had developed in Ilfracombe post-pandemic. As you know, many private rental landlords were cashing in on staycations by flipping to holiday lets or were selling up to take advantage of higher property prices. Ilfracombe was hit hard due to having much higher levels of households in private rental. This in turn was due to the local economy being one of low wage employment and seasonal 0 hours work, which precludes many from securing a mortgage. Even for families who might stand a chance of home ownership, competition with people from outside of the area for limited properties have pushed prices well beyond their reach. Today in Ilfracombe, we see many local families in temporary accommodation or awaiting the eviction date post the issue of a Section 21. However, there is simply no alternative accommodation available. Renting in the private sector in Ilfracombe has become insecure and rental prices have increased substantially. The cost of living crisis and rent arrears may push many more into potential homelessness. The opportunity to build housing for local people on this piece of land at Bigglescombe Nursery is a chance to give at least some of those households a better future. It is a difficult site to develop, but we can draw down funding that will make this proposition viable. We can build a vibrant small community close to town, which will enable local people to stay close to their jobs, schools and support, but more than that, to give them a stable and sustainable future. The economy of our town depends on the ability of businesses to employ local people, especially in hospitality, care work, retail, factory and the tourist industry. As these are mostly low-paid work, we could give people the chance to live in a home that is truly affordable by building on this site. It is also an opportunity to ensure that key workers in our town have a stable place to live. The impact of tackling the housing crisis has seen immense pressure on services, particularly those of the District Council. This is now an opportunity for you to take a positive step forward towards changing the lives of a significant minority of those households experiencing a housing crisis. So I urge you on behalf of Ilfracombe Community Land Trust and the people of Ilfracombe to support this proposal. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Right, okay, I have two people who would like to follow that up, but thank you very much. Councillor Prowse would like to speak and then Councillor Wilkinson.
Because I don't know how many times we've talked about this site, and can I personally say I moved the recommendation to the pleasure. I think it's where we should have been 20 years ago. quite honestly. And I mean, the reason it wasn't, it's not actually our fault, but there were lots of doubts in terms of two members in the past and a lot of opposition from some of the neighbours. But this is the logical thing to do, Chair. The one thing I would say is that, I mean, I see we're going to, we're talking about £10,000-12,000 a plot, which I understand. Could I suggest a project on the capital receipt, because this is going to use up, the community-led housing fund, isn't it? Could we not look at ring fencing any capital receipt from this to actually help other communities? I'm looking at John and John will kill me for this, but I just think it is important because we're using up the whole fund in one go here. But I support it, but I just think it'd be nice to be able to replenish a bit from this project that would then help other communities after. Is that impossible?
Not possible, Chair. Obviously, the treatment of capital receipt and then what you do with it is a separate decision, because obviously that's subject to a further report coming forwards in terms of what we're going to spend the money on. But it's not, say, undoable. You wouldn't be able to do it part of this report, but obviously we can put that into the minutes and take that part of the recommendation moving forwards. The members' desire would be.
There's going to be a full council decision anyway, it's the capital program.
It is. Obviously, if the capital receipt comes in, then obviously it's a separate full council decision then to vary the capital programme for what you want to spend that money on. But obviously you can minute that today in terms of what members anticipate, members' aspirations are. And then that would be subject then to a further report coming forward by members to full council.
Okay, thank you.
If I recall correctly, Chair, we have a report come into the next agenda, which looks at the community housing fund that we've got locally, and ways of replenishing it. So it may well be that we can deal with it as part of that.
Thanks very much.
Sounds excellent.
In which case, Chair, with some enthusiasm, say this is the right solution for the problem. Developable sites of sensible money are almost impossible to find, so we've just got to accept this is an extraordinary site. And, we've got to make sure we put some oomph into it. So I'm quite happy for us to sell it at a peppercorn, if people certainly at a social housing rate. So I'm happy to give it a chance.
You're moving 2.1, but also you would like it.
Just noted that, we look at the options in terms of reviewing them.
Yeah, I'd suggest that be looked at when the report comes, because then you can look at all of the funding options and very okay.
So just move 2.1, Mr. Wright.
Yes.
Certainly, there's some of us under lots of pressure from our communities to say, what does the district council do to help us?
Yeah.
I'm just flagging it up for now.
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Councillor Wilkinson.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Personally, tongue in cheek, I would have to declare an interest. I was actually born yards away in what was the Ilfracombe Maternity Hospital, but that was a few years ago.
Yes.
Can you stop the barracking? CLTs are the way forward. There's no question of this. I'm more than happy to second the proposal here, and with the caveats that Councillor Browse has put in there. I mean, since I was born and lived in Ilfracombe, it has changed massively. My feelings on what's happened because of second homes and short-term holiday lets are now well known. Anything we can do to protect the integrity of Ilfracombe, I think, is vital. And this is one small way, but a big step that we can go forward on to promote Ilfracombe. So I'm more than happy to second it, Chair.
Thank you. Any other comment? No?
Can I ask a question, Chairman?
Yeah, please.
Would they all be under social rental prices in the land?
Can we answer that?
It's intended that the CLT look at the 10 options to decide their preferences for 100% social rent.
But we should be surely asking for that if it's the case because of low incomes and all this of it, and trying to make it affordable for people who rent and all this. We should be asking, absolutely including that it should be social rented values. Because otherwise you're going to mix up to make it, because in actual fact it's being built by, looks like a company.
Mallowa Housing, Chair, I asked her, got to be given a bit of, as a developer, I've got to make the figures work. So, I just think we mustn't tie their hands absolutely. I mean, the CLT are going to own the freehold, so they'll be the ones doing the negotiation. And I'm sure that their preference would be for social rent, so the highest percentage, if not all.
Well, that's the question you should have asked.
We're being nodded behind you from the.
That's the question you should have asked first of all, because then you actually achieve what you're trying to achieve, which is a full rural cost housing.
Chair, I mean, in the one in Brooklyn, we're working on the moment, that's again with Aston. And they are insisting as the National Trust and sells the land, that it will be social rent in perpetuity and never to go on to the open market. So social rent as opposed to affordable rent, which was, I think, 60% and 80%, isn't it? Social rent is 60.
I'm sure that's the intention of the CLT.
Chairman, with respect, I think if it was included at this stage, it would be covered.
So you're making an amendment?
I am, Chairman, because I think it's an amendment. If we're trying to provide suitable housing for people in affordable housing, we should be, especially because you're doing a minimum transaction there, make sure it's safeguarded for the future and safeguarding the people who want to rent at an affordable rent, especially in the neighbourhood. So I would try to include that in the proposal, please.
That's what the chair said.
Yeah, I don't think council Lane needs to worry because it's already in there. It talks about like for the development of custom built social housing.
Yes, as long as it's also short, isn't it?
It says social.
Okay. Okay, then.
Chair, sorry,
Sorry.
just wants to come back.
I just wanted to clarify on my point actually that the CIP has like only looking at 20% social rent. It has looked at a hybrid model where there was different plans on the site to try and create more of a mixed community. But we do support the CIP's decision with their ongoing support and management of the site for the 100%. I think.
Thank you for that.
And Chair, paragraph 4.7 sets that out as well, refers to the scheme being 100% social rent.
Okay, thank you. Right, in that case then, are we happy to vote on the proposition, which is basically 2.1 on page 263? All those in favour, please show. That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thanks for your time. Okay, would somebody pop out and tell our councillor from Notre Dame that she's welcome back in? Thank you. You're welcome to stay if you wish, but I expect you've got other things you'd probably like to get on with.
You have the things going on there. Imagine so.
Yes, indeed. Okay, thank you. Right, so we go back then to item 6 on the
Chair.
agenda.
Sorry, just in relation to that same item,
Yeah.
obviously the final figure in terms of the capital receipt does need to be negotiated. So with your approval, we'd just like to add into the recommendation to agree to delegate to the head of service to agree that final figure. If members are happy to add that into the recommendation.
Are you happy, members? Yep, okay. Pass.
Do we need to vote on that again?
You already did, yes.
In negotiation, leader?
I
In
thought
negotiation, in the consultation with the leader, yeah. We'll have that.
we're in a formal vote, and those in favour, please show. Thank you, unanimous. Thank you very much. So let's go back to item 6, which is the mid-year treasury management report, which is pages 19 to 32.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. The Council's Treasury Management Strategy for 22-23 was agreed by full council back in February. This is the mid-year review report, which is looking to make some amendments to the strategy and to give members an update on the current treasury position. The table in section 4.1 on page 20 sets out the proposed changes to the strategy. The forecast capital requirement, capital financing requirement for 198 need for capital purposes increases from 29 million to 25 million due to simplicities in the capital programme for schemes such as the Seven Brethren redevelopment and Greenhouse capital improvements. Forecast external borrowing or the operational boundary decreases from 25 million to 11 million due to reduced capital expenditure and higher year-end cash flow projections. There is also a change to the upper limit on borrowing between 12 months and 2 years to allow for greater flexibility for short-term borrowing. Given the current economic uncertainty and that interest rate forecast show bank rate is expected to fall in a couple of years' time. So the council's underlying need to borrow is forecast to be 25 million at the end of the financial year, funded by 9 million of external borrowing, 1.5 million of finance leases for the vehicle fleet, and the remaining 14.5 million from internal borrowing from our own cash flows and reserves. Internal borrowing remains the prudent and most cost-effective approach, so any further slippages in the capital programme or improvements to our cash flows will be used to reduce the amount of external borrowing actually undertaken. Recent changes to bank rate have improved our interest investment returns, with 60,000 being received over the half-year period compared to the budget for the year of 35,000. Our investment portfolio yield was 0.59% compared to our new benchmark Sondra rate of 1.19%. Using the cash flow balances for internal borrowing has also reduced our borrowing costs, and we are currently projecting an underspend of 160,000 on our interest payable budget. The Chief Finance Officer confirms the council's operated within the Treasury and Prudential indicators of the Treasury strategy. I would like to refer members back to the recommendations in section 2 of the report and to take notice.
Thank you very much, Adam. Anyone got any questions? No? Watch.
I'm enjoying reading Adam's forecast of interest rates. But he's obviously a betting man.
Well, we've got two recommendations then on page 19, 2.1 and 2.2. Are we happy with those recommendations? John, Regina, move.
Second, Tim.
Councillor Lane has, okay, all those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. Right, so we move on then. You've got away quite lightly there, Adam.
Yes.
To the performance and financial management Q2 report, pages 33 to 74. So,
Thank you,
over
Chair.
to you, John.
I'll pick that one up. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Hopefully I'll get away just as lightly as so members, this is your Q2 performance up to the end of September 2022. We'll start on page 33. Pleased to report that we're currently forecasting a net budget surplus of £40,000. Further details of the breakdown of this are in Appendix A, which are on pages 45 and 46 of your report. I'll just run through some of the headline context of the Q2 position. We budgeted the financial year to include a £250,000 worth of salary vacancy savings. The current position forecasts in Appendix A are forecasting that we will achieve 441,000, which is a positive financial position of 191,000 additional savings. Main reasons behind this are due to timings of filling the capacity building posts that members approved as part of the 22-23 budget that was approved in February. So that's a positive in terms of the budget decision. In terms of additional cost pressures that we're seeing, heightened temporary accommodation costs are being seen through the financial year. I'm currently forecasting additional cost impacts of around £200,000 over and above the budgeted temporary accommodation costs. Fortunately, this is mitigated by utilising residual balances that we rolled forward from previous years from the homelessness earmark reserve. And whilst that alleviates the pressure in the current financial year, it is only a one-off amount, and therefore if that continued pressure is seen into future financial years, we can only use that reserve once, and it's not an ongoing balance that we can take monies from. Also, we're seeing additional pressure within the joint building control partnership with Mid Devon. There's been a decline in income during the 22-23 year, and also challenges to recruit into some of the vacant posts that the service currently has, and that's also seen an increase in the use of agency staffing costs. So we've also seen a decline in income and also additional cost pressures. Forecasting a net deficit to the building control partnership, our share of the costs of 67,000. That includes utilising the 50,000 contribution from the building control reserve that was set up from previous year's trading surpluses. So the service should break even, but where we do see surpluses, they're put into a reserve to mitigate them where we see decline in trading positions. You'll recall a report I brought to committee in July, which detailed the inflationary pressures that we're seeing in the current financial year. Most of those are still in line with the July forecasts, except for the additional employee cost pressure from the staff pay award that was being negotiated last time we brought that report to members. That pay award has now been agreed with the unions, and the figures are in line with the forecasts that are shown in section 4.17, which is a higher than budgeted inflationary pay award for staff, which from the council's perspective is obviously really positive. We want our staff to obviously receive the higher pay award, but that does obviously see a cost pressure to the council budget, and that is over £800,000 higher than originally budgeted as part of the budget that was approved by members. That will also be an ongoing cost into the 23-24 budget, which will be bringing to members as a paper to the November full council. That will see £1,925 per full-time equivalent employee added to their salary, and that will be settled and paid in the December pay, and backdated to the beginning of the financial year. Other inflationary pressures we're seeing include additional fuel costs across our fleet and additional energy costs, and these are shown in section 4.18. Those inflationary cost pressures do add around £1 million to the budget in 22-23 and will continue into 23-24. However, we're looking to fund those in-year pressures through the utilisation of the previously created budget management reserve, which was set aside to deal with those fluctuations within the budget and have been built up over the last couple of financial years. This has provided the council with the much needed protection it needed in 22-23 and was a prudent approach following the pandemic, where we've now seen some of our income sources start to recover, and also some of the residual COVID funding that the council received, where some councils made decisions to outsource things such as administering the business grants. This council made the decision to carry out that work internally, and therefore the additional funding we had for the administration we placed into that budget management reserve to help mitigate future year pressure. A number of councils don't have the benefit of such a reserve, and obviously is seeing those continued high pressures during 22-23. We will obviously see that through to 23-24, but we are managing to mitigate that through the current financial year. The other significant in-year cost pressure that hasn't been included in the forecast figures yet is the award of costs in relation to the Yelland planning appeal. Once that amount is known, as we previously set out, we will bring a report to members outlining the costs and also how the council plans to fund that cost. At the end of March 2022, we were holding a collection fund reserve, which is the reserve that holds the residual balances in relation to collecting business rates and council tax. Those collection funds deficits and surpluses are reversed out through following financial years, and where the council awards things such as rate relief, where the government announce further reliefs to businesses, that takes a couple of years for that to unwind in terms of the impact on the revenue budget. So this reserve then helps to smooth that effect. That reserve was currently holding a balance of around 1.2 million. What we're proposing this year is to transfer a further £400,000 from that reserve into the budget management reserve to replenish that, now that we're utilising that reserve to help bridge the budget gap in 22-23. That does still leave the collection fund reserve with a residual balance of circa £800,000 protection against future volatility. Because that's our 40% share of the business rates income, that does protect the council for around a £2 million decline in business rates income if that does occur in future financial years. As Adam has already alluded to, at 30th of September, our total external borrowing was £3 million. And a prudent approach for us, as already set out, is to internally borrow from our cash balances to fund the borrowing requirements in advance of any external borrowing need. This has resulted in £160,000 reduction in loan interest payments in 22-23. And what we are proposing is to place that saving on the loan borrowing costs into a separate Treasury Management Reserve to help mitigate against any future higher interest rate costs that the council may see in 23-24 onwards, to help smooth the effects over future year budgets. Section 4.2 just sets out our earmarked reserves. They're set out on pages 47 to 49. Within that, you'll see at the very top, we've got the budget management reserve, where we're planning to utilise just under £1 million of that in the current financial year. And then you'll see proposals to top that reserve up to cover in-year pressures moving forwards and also through to 23-24 budget setting. Also, lower down in the reserve, you'll see a balance of around £30,000 for economic hardship reserve. And this is a reserve that's been built up through residual COVID funding that we had for economic financial hardship schemes. And what we're proposing for that reserve is we've been utilising some of that with the Household Support Fund, but we're also proposing to set up a new Community Warm Spaces Fund. And this is for voluntary groups, charities, community interest companies, churches, etc., parish and town councils, where you'll be able to apply for funding to support your work in supporting communities located in the area through the cost of living crisis over the winter period. Some examples of that could be providing a warm space for the community to meet up, where the community can receive information around budget saving tips, providing help with food, providing health and wellbeing support. Applications for funding schemes will be up to £1,000, and details of that will be coming out shortly on our website as to how those groups and towns and parishes can apply for such funding. That will be utilising the Economic Financial Hardship Reserve, which currently has a balance of around £30,000 held within it. The fund will close in March so that we can utilise that funding before the end of the financial year. Any residual funding will roll forward in the reserve into the new financial year. Moving over to the capital programme, that's attached in Appendix D on pages 53 to 56. You will see set out in section 4.43 variations to the capital programme of some credit £6 million. That's not £6 million being removed, that's where projects are moving into later financial years due to capital slippages. You'll see set out on page 37 and 38 some additional funding requests that have come through. One of these is around harbour infrastructure. And this is a positive capital bid come forwards from the Harbour Master to improve harbour infrastructure. A number of the elements included in the capital programme, within the capital business case, she's managed to attract 75% external funding to actually go towards the cost. So it's an overall capital programme variation of over 400,000, but with over £200,000 worth of external funding to go towards that. A lot of the improvements set out in that capital programme bid are health and safety requirements that we would need to carry out ourselves as a council. So to actually manage to attract such a significant level of external funding at a time when we would need to actually put all of that money into those health and safety requirements is a really positive business case and one that we would recommend members for approval. Secondly is a capital bid around the Ilfracombe Water Sports Centre. Members will recall we've got a £3.3 million water sports centre being built. The majority of that, around 95% of that, is coming from external funding. This is an additional complex being requested in the top part of the car park, so separate to the water sports centre itself. Because the current location of the water sports centre is quite restrictive in terms of being able to add further storage to the site, this proposed new facility will provide a secure access controlled area for parking for additional not-for-profit groups and schools, minibuses and trailers, also including a container storage space for 4 interested parties and also a 20-foot container providing a changing room and briefing area in addition to the water sports centre. That's a £177,000 capital bid, but the additional revenue from the additional complex being built from these interested parties will generate around £20,000 worth of income. So it does repay itself within a number of financial years. What it adds to the water sports centre is increased usage from those community groups, in addition to the 3 parties that are going to use the water sports centre. It also adds financial viability to the cafe lease in terms of increased usage through the commercial part of the complex. And it also will generate additional car park income in the area from the additional heightened usage of the water sports centre. You'll see 2 further capital bids coming forwards, smaller items. One is around ICT and our additional software licenses, £70,000. This is to continue 2 years worth of software licenses for our virtual desktops. And this is continuing the current environment that we will operate in terms of ability to be able to work remotely and continue the current way of working through the hybrid approach. And a further capital bid for Fremington wall repairs for £51,000. There was already a capital programme item for Fremington River wall repair, but the costs came in significantly higher due to the logistics and location of wall repairs in a sea environment. So this is to bring that capital bid up to the quote that we've now had through to carry out those works. You'll see set out on pages 39 and 40 the other capital programme variations. In addition to that, on page 40, we've got the 23-24 capital programme variations of 1.15 million. This is the Severn Brethren flood defence variation with the section 106 funding that we're receiving going into the capital programme to carry out the flood defence works. And then that brings your capital programme up to 29.1 million. And how that programme is financed is set out in section 4.48. You'll see external grants and contributions of over 50% of that, which shows obviously the significant amount of work the team have done in terms of attracting external funding towards the capital investment set out. Section 4.5, your report already sets out the treasury management performance for the 6-month period. Adam's already covered off those figures in terms of the investment interest received and also the level of external borrowing. And then sections 4.6 and 4.7 set out your debt management and collection rate figures in terms of council tax and business rates. Pleasing to see in section 4.610 the level of council tax and business rates collection is higher than what it was in 21-22. Which, considering the current economic climate, is quite positive for the 6-month position. But obviously, the winter period moving forwards will provide some challenges, and obviously the Q3 figures will be a more representative figure in terms of where that financial year is standing. In terms of the level of debts outstanding in sections 4.7, you'll see at 30th September the level of external debt has gone from 1.9 this time last year outstanding to 2.5 million. So on paper, it looks like it's increased by £500,000, but that does include the 1.15 million section 106 money that we've just raised to get that flood defence money into the council. So it does slightly distort the performance figure at the end of September. Once that money is received, that will bring the level of external debt down to around 1.4 million. And that is actually a lower level than the level of outstanding debt than it was in September 2021. The remainder of the report, Chair, is key performance indicators and service plan information set out in Appendix E on pages 59, and the recommendations are on page 33 in sections 2.1 to 2.6. Chair, that concludes the 42 report. I'm happy to take any questions from members.
Thank you very much. A very thorough report. I think members appreciate that writing a report like this, as well as presenting it, takes a lot of preparation. So thank you to you and your team. Right, and Councillor Petrunas.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, it's a pity the government can't do it, isn't it? I mean, it's almost consoling that this year the financial position is fairly stable. It's just we don't really know what's going to happen next year. We have to wait until the autumn statement to see what new surprises are going to be unleashed upon us. But that's not really what my question's about. It's about one of the performance issues. On page 68, it talks about the recycling rate. And in Q1 this year, it's 2.6% lower than Q1 last year, which is, you know, a huge drop. Is that due to the staffing issues that, I mean, not only us, but everybody in North Devon will probably know that because of this miscollections?
Did you want to add anything on that context?
That hasn't helped. Certainly, a bit of us to try and get the is out in schools and do things.
No, my phone pick up. No. That's not there. Can you come forward? Come forward early.
Difficult to answer the question, John, but yes, I think it's no secret that we have really struggled on the recycle rates, and the staff shortages due to initially COVID, and then the national driver shortage is making it more and more difficult for us to get everything that's presented to us each week. So I don't think it's a huge surprise to see that drop in rates.
It is quite a, sorry. It is quite a significant drop. I don't recall ever seeing a drop or even an increase, you know, of such a magnitude before. But it seems unusual, that's all. Maybe it was weather, no, I think there was any bad weather, was there? First 3 months of the year, in June.
No, I think the first 3 months of the year, we were still particularly hit by the driver shortage.
And do you have any indication, albeit we don't have necessarily like the very final figures about what's happening in quarter two next year?
It's certainly better with quarter one at the moment, and we're certainly from the staff point of view as well. We've put out some comms on social media, we've done some internal training, and we seem to be recovering at the moment, a touch wood here, but getting our vacancies filled and managing to allocate big rounds each week, not every day, but certainly I think last week, for example, there were 3 days where all rounds went out fully staffed, which was quite refreshing to see, because those days have been few and far between since I've been in post over the last 10 minutes.
Okay. Thank you.
Chairman, can I ask a question? Sorry. No, you can't leave then. No, you leave.
You've been for ages. You go for it.
You're going to have British. I've got a simple one. It's about, it's about Framington and the capital liability on this wall against the river. Yeah. Shame Hannah's on it, because she probably know the answer. Because from my recollection, I mean, there's a very successful business running now at Framington here. And I don't know what arrangements were made in terms of the transfer of that land or the lease of that land that went not to the parish but to a trust that the parish were involved in setting up. I just think it's something that ought to be revisited if it is such a successful business. Because, you know, we've got all the liabilities and none of the benefits. I just think that was it ain't going to be the end of it, is it? It's gonna be for years, and you know, an old Victorian seawall that's going to need some repair in the future.
And this is phase 2 of all repairs, so we've already carried out a phase 1 about 18 months ago. But yeah, I don't know the answers around the trust, but I will find it out and come back to you.
Thank you. Right, councillor Lennon, it's all yours.
Couple jobs, I think John, actually, I've been on island some of it, but I mean, it's regarding release of funds, page 40, capital programme, 4.4111. Then Brethren, it's a flood defence, 1.15 million, just 106 numbers, okay? On page 43, at 4.73, there's a one-off invoice for 1 million, which is basically transfer, which is raised on 8th September, and it was approved in the area and the previous. But it's actually shown at 4.7 in general debtors column. How does this relate to the flood defence work? And surely shouldn't it be under 106? We need to order 106.
Yeah, so
how does it all mix up together?
So the level of debt and the item 4.73 is us raising the debtor invoice to the solicitors to get the section 106 monies in from the developer.
Okay.
So that's the money coming into the council. And then what we need to do then separately is vary the capital programme in order to then spend that money in terms of then commissioning those flood defence works. So that's the capital programme element earlier in the report to put it into the capital programme. So one is getting the funding in, which is then the income and the level of debtor. And then the second item is then varying the capital programme to then be able to spend the money. So even though it's going into the capital programme and we're asking for release of funds, we won't then start commissioning and spending on that until such time as that income is then actually being received.
It normally comes in as a separate decision as a 106, doesn't it?
It is. So that's the separate decision in terms of the 106. So the 106 is a separate agreement. And then in order to get the 106 money in from the solicitors, we then normally have to raise a debtor invoice. What we're doing in 4.73 is no different to any other section 106 money. The only reason we're flagging it up in 4.73 is such a large amount, it distorts the performance in terms of the level of debt outstanding at that period.
Yeah, is that a very dual for the programme, isn't it? Because of that's only gone in.
So the money's coming in from the solicitor, and then the other side is we'll then add it into the capital programme to then spend it once that money's actually being physically received.
Thank you for that. On page 40 and 45, works and recycling, well, it used to show works and recycling trade waste figures. And used to show, and I was wondering, it doesn't seem to be a period to be in at time.
And that's because the appendix A, the variances to the budget. At the moment, the level of trade waste income we budgeted for is in line with the level of income we're actually receiving. So last year, we actually saw additional trade waste income over and above what was originally being forecast. We actually saw a slight increase, and that was down to the invoicing of trade waste for the previous year when we were in the pandemic. But what we're seeing in the 22-23 year is the trade waste income is actually holding up against the budget that we set.
Surely it would be nice to see it in, that's what we could actually show it as that. Because I think I've questioned in the past about actually whether the trade waste is actually standing.
Yeah, I could only show it if it was down on budget or up on budget, but because it's actually in line with budget, then it isn't really a variation to the budget at the moment. So I'd only show it in there if there was a material movement to what we've actually budgeted for. But you're right, it is a pertinent question you asked in terms of what's the trade waste business,
because
watching space in terms of income coming in against costs.
You're running it as a separate business, really technically, and you should be showing it as a separate business. Then you can justify why you're doing it. You should actually, otherwise you're mixing up a separate business within your actual business you run.
Yeah, I mean, it is a separate business, but both every service in the council is a separate business in itself. It would only be showing it separate to these figures if it was actually, in a sense, a separate company, but it is, and it is part of the NDC services we offer, and therefore we need to include that within the total revenue budget. So if members want to see additional trade waste figures, we can show that separately. If you want to see a separate breakdown. We only used to show it if there was a variation to the budget, which obviously in previous quarters and previous periods there was. The reason we're showing it here is because there isn't any variation against the budget we set. So I suppose in a sense there isn't any alarm bells for members because we set a budget for trade waste. And probably for the first time in a number of years, I'm not reporting that we're actually down on income against trade waste.
We wouldn't know that unless you told us.
I suppose you will know it by it not being here.
What strategy are the authority adopting to assist the bill control trading statement? Where you this year will probably end up London 17,000 highlighted, London 17,000 predicted loss, 67,000 deficit, and 50,000 which you've had to transfer across authority to support the bill control.
So as I alluded to, obviously we're seeing a decline in volume of income. What we are doing is reviewing the charging structure for the building control partnerships to make sure, firstly, it's still competitive in the market, but also reviewing the fees and charges we charge so that we can then recover the actual cost of the service. Obviously, we're seeing, so it's got a bit of a double whammy this year because we've seen a decline in income and we've got heightened costs because we're using agency staff to fill those vacant posts. So Jeremy is looking at strategies how we can fill those vacant posts and get the level of employee costs down. So it's now salary costs rather than agency. And secondly, he's reviewing the level of charging structure across Mid Devon and North Devon so that we're charging an appropriate level to recover those costs. The building control partnership, you can't make a profit on the chargeable activities. It should be break even over a 3-year period. We've seen trading surpluses for a couple of financial years, and that's where the reserve has started to be built up. So that's why we're using the reserve to mitigate against some of the loss this year. But in order to bridge the gap that's there, Jeremy's now looking to review those charges and they'll come to members for approval at full council.
Okay, thank you. That last one is about the land release fund for St. Rutherlands. I see it's slipped into the 23-24 year. And I did see it on there, which Sarah continued. Do the funding have to be paid back if not used by a set date? And can you confirm the date? Because at page 65, you talk about extension required until February 28th of February 2023, which is the land release fund.
Yes,
so I'm just wondering where are we to with that, and I see that trying to move it forward, of course.
Yeah, we're looking to move forwards. We're just in the process of signing up the development agreement. There is a timeline on the land release fund. It's in quarter 4 of this financial year, so it is somewhere between January and March. I think it's January.
It's on
It's either January or February. So yes, obviously that has been extended and we've had approval of those extensions, but because we're so close now to signing, the government are comfortable, obviously, with us going to them for extensions because we are so close to getting it over the line. However, if we didn't achieve that, and say, for example, it did fall away, we would need to repay that money back to government.
And I believe there was also a fund of £1 million meant for improvements to highway works. So is that separate from this fund, some here?
That is part of the two sums.
What was for improvements, what was highway improvements?
Yeah, it was originally 2.2 million. 1 million of that was for the infrastructure, highway works, and the other million was around flood defence. So that's where this overall £2 million land release fund that was originally approved covers off those costs. But obviously that is all wrapped up as part of that development agreement moving forwards with the second revenue project. So the 1.8 million that's shown in there for 1.9 million for capital programme is the original 1.2 and the 1.0 million each. We've spent some of it on obviously getting it to the current situation in terms of planning and getting to that development agreement.
And last question, page 64, planning, development manager, process efficiencies. And how many, because you talk about agency staff with the bill control and that. And sometimes you look at the plan officers and that thing, I don't know that plan officer, don't know that plan officer. So I'm just wondering how many staff are actually agency workers now working in the planning department? And you know, how are you going to address if it is agency workers, how are you going to address it going forward? Because to me, there appears to be let's say names popping up now, and I'm thinking, are the agency staff or are they actually employed by this department?
So there's currently, I think, 3 agency staff.
Full-time.
Yes, they are full-time. Their agency positions were extended to September. I think they're now been extended to December. But between September and December, we have been advertising for senior planning positions and planning officer posts. That was all part of the capacity building posts built into the establishment. So they have gone out to market to see if we can recruit into those. But obviously, you can't hide away from the fact it is a challenging market. So obviously, when we do go out to recruit, if we are unsuccessful, then obviously we have got that reliance on the agency staff. So, but we are trying, and we obviously those remunerations for planning officer posts were improved going out to market. We have been successful, obviously, in recruiting to our development manager posts. If you know, Tracy, that one started.
Yeah.
We hope now that we can fit into the recruitment to those wider vacant posts.
Because I see that you've got funding across to help support it.
So, yeah.
On the last round of recruitment, we were successful in filling a couple of the posts. And we're just about to go out again to try and fill the other posts. But I mean, yeah, we don't like using agency staff because it's more expensive. But the reality is you've got to plug the gap somehow because you've got to keep the service running. So we try and keep it to a minimum, as everybody knows. And as permanent staff come into the establishment, the use of agency staff will drop off.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Chairman.
Joe, I just wanted to say, from what I can see, I mean, there's a huge crisis here for local government. Because it's not just building control officers and planning officers, it's environment health officers, housing officers, people who used to come to local authorities, didn't they, straight from university and look forward to building a career in local government, and now working in the private sector. And hence there we are, having to go to agencies to pick up these, exactly these sorts of people. And I don't know what the solution is. I mean, it's a problem, not just for us, it's every council facing the same thing. But I think, I think we all get a bit irritated with lengths of time and problems of staff shortage, but I think we've just got to support them best we can. Because I think the planning unit are doing a pretty good job with all the vacancies that they're holding at the moment. Without this, I think there are 3 senior planner roles that have been vacant for months. So being in that position, and so it's put an extra strain on team leaders and the senior people I've got, because they've actually got to go and do a bit more work on agency planners work, haven't they? So I suppose it's exactly the same in building control. So I don't know what the answer is, but I think I don't know, that debate again, but I mean, obviously, they're looking at the possibility of building control of setting the company up so that the pay structures can reflect what goes on in the market. Somehow or another, we're going to have to do a similar sort of thing in some of these other specialties, I think, because otherwise we're never going to fill all the vacancies. But I'm not. So I just think we've got to be as supportive we can of the staff that they're working really hard now.
Chair, if I may, it's slightly off subject, but Mr. Price is absolutely right. I mean, I think the recruitment issues that all local authorities are suffering at the moment is one of the biggest challenges for local authorities at the present time, and probably likely to be over the next few years, because we've all talked about funding and everything, but if we've got funding, we still can't find staff, and it's not just us; it's virtually every local authority. And somehow or other, as a sector, we have to make the sector more attractive to people, as you say, when they leave university. And a lot of that comes down to pay.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Chairman, how do you get an all employing younger staff? Is that moving forward? Because somebody suggested to me all the older ones were younger staff once.
Well, yeah, I suppose so.
So remember.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little bit concerned that we're straying a tiny bit off the agenda. We must move on because we've got lots to get through this meeting. But it is a really important, serious point. And we are very well aware of it.
Just to reassure Councillor Lane, that is something we are doing across the council.
Yeah.
And I think we talk about that as well.
We have recommendations 2.1 to 2.6 on page 33. Is somebody happy to move that?
I'll move that, Chairman.
Thank you. Seconder, Councillor Pearson. Okay. All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much. That's unanimous. Thank you. Thank you very much for that very thorough report. Okay, moving on to the item 8, which is environmental policy progress on implementation, which is pages 75 to 78. You're doing that one?
Yeah, I'll do that one. Unfortunately, Don Sidney was unable to join us today because it's a fairly straightforward report. This is refers to our environmental policy that was the revised policy was adopted in October last year. The recommendation of the report is just to note the progress update, and that's a requirement the environment enhancement team to update once in the year. To say that the report is fairly straightforward, there's just really an activity report update against all the subheadings in the policy. I think particular note, it's good to see that we've been successful in approximately £100,000 worth of external funding from Salix Round 2 funding, which is enabling us to review and build assets, undertake some surveys and then implement a few changes to those assets. One of the biggies at this stage is the replacement of the LED lighting for that built assets. That's the ambition. So some good progress there. Further survey work's being undertaken as we speak, and then rolling out work on those assets to reduce the carbon footprint and our emissions. Don's been working with the regional adaptation strategy. The LGA developed a toolkit, and there's a Southwest adaptation strategy being developed now. Other, I think, significant projects to note are the Yo Valley woodland. One of our subheadings was protecting the natural and built environment. We will be against all the odds, because it has been a challenge getting hold of trees, believe it or not. We will be planting now 19,000 trees starting in December. That work will roll out this planting season, which will be done the year. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks for this.
It's great to see the plans and the strategy progressing. progressing rather slowly, I think, in terms of actual implementation. Do you have any quantifiable objectives? I mean, you talked about the LEDs, we talked about LEDs 3 years ago. That's before Donald arrived, but I mean, that was, to me, should have been a quick thing, not been terrible. Do we know when that will be completed, for example?
Of all of the assets, oh gosh, that's the question now. I don't have a completion date for it, but as you know, we have made significant progress this time, sort of since this time last year. I think action, you will start to see more action now, because I think the first 12 months of this have really been about trying to get a baseline. It's been very difficult, particularly with COVID, to actually baseline what our carbon footprint looks like, and we're not the only organisation struggling to do that. I think some authorities have rushed in and done more delivery, but perhaps it's not a true figure. I think what Don has done is been very, very honest about with them. We are looking closely at everything that we procure, because actually measuring your true carbon footprint involves looking at what we're buying and selling as an authority, and to actually measure that properly takes an awful lot of work to actually base on. I think I'm talking to Mark Drummond at Crematorium, and that looks like there's an opportunity there to deliver solar panels on the roof there, because the new chapel was designed with sufficient strengthening to make the roof take the solar panels, and it should be, in theory, a fairly straightforward process to put the panels in. I'm just identifying the budget with him at this stage, and then you should see that one rolling out. So putting solar panels in the crematorium is far more straightforward than doing that for Brinsworthy, because there's you have the server here at council, for example, the IT server, and you need to make sure that we've got sufficient power here to keep that function if we do have.
No, that's, I mean, we seem to be a bit more process bound than would be desirable, I think.
But like I say, I think we would, things like Yo Valley Woodlands, that's a nice one.
Yeah.
And actually, we've done the groundwork, we've secured the funding, and we can actually do some direct delivery.
I think I'm more concerned about things like solar panels, which is another thing that's taken a long time. We could be in a better position with our energy had we invested now, at least some of the solar panels and also some others. And for example, we also got them to have solar panels. That's a miss that we
I think the challenge is making sure that we, putting the panels on isn't that difficult. That's quite straightforward. I think the important thing is that just looking at the budget, and John's doing a great job balancing the budget at the moment. But it's really important that we make the right choices and take out the right agreement with a company. And don't get it wrong. We want to make sure that we know our stuff, and then we can present opportunities to members, and we can make the correct decisions to make sure that in the long term we will be more efficient with the deals that we're signing up to for extensive energy.
Councillor Patrice.
Just a quick one. Have I missed it, or does it not mention the installation of electric car charging points in some of our car parks?
I thought there was a mention of EVs. That's another good one. Thanks for mentioning it, John, because that is rolling out quite nicely.
It's all this stuff, John.
Sorry. Councillor David.
I don't want to delay the meeting, but I would suggest perhaps we need the next climate meeting, we kind of have an agenda item which just sort of ticks some boxes in priorities. Because I remember at the start, Councillor Pearson mentioning lighting and stuff, but actually one of the officers reported that the server room air conditioning was a huge dent in electric rather than concentrating on LED lighting. So perhaps we could look at some priorities for
Chair,
the
on
next climate
on
meeting.
the LED lighting, it's the capital programme has been varied, so there's 80,000 investment will be in there. The project officers have kept it within the 22-23 financial year rather than moving it into 23-24. So there is an aspiration and intention to get that carried out this financial year. So the initial investment to get the, like I say, as Nettie says, sorry, Councillor Pearson says, the quick wins, in the sense, if we can get that implemented, that will save us circa 20 to 30,000 pounds a year on our energy usage. So I think that side of things we can get done quite quickly. The Planning Market Future High Streets Fund project, again, we're looking at solar panels, obviously on the roof there, which is part of the recent survey work that we were carrying out in terms of the strength of the roof in order to take solar panels. So there is a lot of work going on in the background. Fortunately, it's not a 5-minute fix in order just to put a solar panel on the roof. We need to make sure the buildings are right in terms of structure. And as Mark alluded to, we need to make sure the business case with the potential providers is right for the council, taking into account the financial implications that has as well. So we are making progress. Sadly, probably not as quickly as members would like to see, but there is a lot of work going on in the background.
I'm glad to hear that, because we have declared a climate emergency and biodiversity emergency, and we need to make it swift progress as we possibly can. But obviously we have to be careful to do the right things and make the right decisions. But I think members, probably all of us, feel, you know, we need to push on as fast as is sensible.
Yeah, I'll just also, in terms of priorities, Councillor, I think that, don't forget we've got the separate carbon plan, which obviously identifies our biggest kind of offending areas, which is built asset emissions and also fuel emissions. So you'll note that we've been talking to the Energy Savings Trust, and they're going to, in the new year, when they've got a full 12 months worth of figures from our fuel usage, consumption and emissions, then we'll be coming back, hopefully with some recommendations on how we can reduce the fleet's emissions and the kind of green fleet activity, which is business travel, which we start. So I think that the carbon plan does sort of show us where we need to focus our attention in order to make a big difference. And we'll come back to you according to the progress report on that.
Yes.
Chair, yeah, I don't mean to be controversial, but we have adopted a carbon crisis, but we've also adopted cost of living crisis, and we've also adopted a housing crisis. And what we're trying to do as officers is to try and balance all of those priorities. And what we are doing as a council is balancing those priorities. We could chuck an awful lot of resource at this area of work, and we could probably move ahead quicker. But we wouldn't then be responding to the housing issues, and we wouldn't then be responding to all the other issues that we have to respond to. So it is trying to find that balance. And yeah, I think, you know, I'm open to that sort of discussion really as to whether that balance is right or not. But we do have an awful lot of conflicting priorities that we are trying to move ahead with together in one hit.
Recommendation.
Thank you. Right.
Can I just make one quick comment? We talked about possibly doing PVs on the prem roof, that's okay, good. But bear in mind, it's jointly run as well.
Yeah.
So that, provided you can do that, you really want to have coverage on board as well, because spend money. But, the questions here, moving wage environments.
Actually,
Well, we've done through the joint committee.
yeah, well, recommendation 2.1 is to note the progress. Is everybody in favour of that? Yeah, okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for filling in, Mark. Right, so we move on to adoption of works in default policy, pages 79 to 100.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take typically this report on behalf of my colleague, Hannah, who did all the work. I'll take it. Yeah. So I thought it was just very quickly says, you know, what, because this really relates to works in default policy, but what are works in default might be a quick query. They arise when an individual fails to comply with a notice issued by the council to carry out works, and where there's a risk to the occupier or the public or both. The individual won't carry out the works, and something that where the council carried out a prosecution, but the individual hasn't completed the works that were required. So yes, I mean, put simply, there's policies in place to provide a general procedure for carrying out works in default as part of or instead of other council enforcement functions. So the committee might recommend that we took an enforcement policy back in July, which was approved. So this kind of links with that. The intention is to set out a clear set of procedures for officers to follow, and for customers and of course members to understand what the process is, and when it is necessary to carry out works in the default. So yes. And it also responds to all the recommendations that we have something like that, a clear guidance that everyone can refer to for when this takes place. So the policies are attached to the report, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Anyone got any questions? No, I certainly welcome the report, and and I'm happy that we adopt it, so I'm happy to move it. Anybody else like to second it? All those in favour, please show. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks.
We let you off.
Thank you.
Yeah, far too easy. Okay. So item 10, energy company obligation, pages 101 to 116. I don't think this will be a long piece, but it's the shredding lorry. Okay. Yeah. Right, thank you. Good morning.
So my report outlines the energy funding obligation in both the short and looking at the district council's participation in the local authority flex scheme.
Yeah, let's do that, because I just, if it's a lorry, just. Looks like, do you want to? I think 5 minutes, that'd be fine. Okay. You then, Wendy, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair. So the report presented today relates to the energy company obligation, ECO for short, and looking at District Council's participation in the local authority flex scheme. The report contains 3 recommendations, and I'll just run through some background and then revisit the recommendations. So ECO is a government energy efficiency scheme to help obviously carbon emissions and tackle fuel poverty. The scheme began in April 2013, and obviously it's had various changes since then. In 2017, it introduced a local authority flexibility and eligibility criteria, and local authorities can then pick their own eligibility, which we did in our statement of intent, which was produced in August 2018. We subsequently changed that in January 2021. So obviously, because of the flexible approach, we receive applications for assistance, obviously review those and then sign the declarations off. The majority of the declarations relate to loft insulation, cavity installation, could be first time central heating. There's various measures that can be achieved. And during, since we've had EcoFlex since August 2018, we've signed off over 800 declarations. Obviously, there was a decline in the applications during two years of COVID, but obviously, I think you can see it's quite a successful process. So Eco4 is the latest scheme from the government and it runs until March 2026. There have been some changes, obviously with the guidance from the government, but positives in that they allow smaller energy companies now to participate in Eco4. Some changes around eligibility and improvements. So the minimum requirement for improvement, so somebody's in an F or G band has to go up to a D rated band in an EPC. So they've obviously been a bit more restrictive about what's required. So again, they've introduced the local authority flex scheme for Eco4. And again, there have been some changes and they've outlined 4 potential routes for assistance, which are outlined in my report. Whilst we aim to utilise all 4 of the routes, we are likely just to commence with route 1. So that's somebody in EPC of D to G, and then income of 31,000. We're currently working with our colleagues in customer services to introduce a firm step application process for verification. So the first, recommendation relates to our revised statement of intent. The second part relates to the charging of declarations. We received the declaration request. There is a process that we have to go through checking and verifications. So we are seeking to make a charge. We will obviously, in conjunction with the head of planning, consider the implementation of that, evaluate it, etc. So that was the second recommendation. And the third recommendation relates to the charter. So obviously, not just us, but obviously the other local authorities use different installers across the district. And there have been some road practices, not necessarily here, but Mid-Devon particularly had an issue. So we came together as a collective and with Cozy Devon Partnership to look at a charter that we could put into place to ensure that obviously that they were doing things appropriately. So that's been done in conjunction with trading standards. So they've drafted this charter, which obviously would again aim obviously to sign up to. Thank you.
Okay, any question?
I've just, just governance schemes and what went before on insulating people's houses. I would really like to see if somehow we can tether subcontractors to be local tradespeople, because often these schemes are rolled out and then subcontractors come from, I've got nothing against Wales, but they come from farther afield, and obviously for the best interest of North Devon, I would like to see somehow, I know it's probably really difficult, but it's just a comment, if we can employ local people, it's great. If we can't, then it's just a comment.
Yeah, thank you, Dave.
Yeah, I mean, Wendy, guess what I'm going to say. This is a sort of a reactive measure, and I do support it, but I mean, I know I've been nagged big time by a colleague of mine in my parish who's very involved with 361 Energy, who is very keen to promote the idea of trying to do this more systematically, like picking on a renewal area, like, part of Ilfracombe or part of Barnstaple base, and actually then chucking the resources into that sort of process, which actually I think has the advantage of being high profile. People see it, understand it, they trust it because it's us going out saying we're going to do this. Because that's one of the big problems. There is a lot of distrust and a bit of, because all cold calling all these people that phone you every day. So I just wondered, Wendy, I mean, obviously it's about government funding of it, but you've made this recommendation, but wondered whether we could look in some more detail, try to have an impact on, like, I'm thinking bits of Victorian housing in perhaps East Ilfracombe or in Barnstaple Central, where Yeovil Vale and Vicarage Street area. There are pockets where you can make a real impact, high profile, and it will act as an educator for other people to understand how things could work in terms of retrofit. That's my question.
In answer to that, obviously the installers will sign a memorandum of understanding with us. And that can contain targeting. So we can say to them, but obviously we do have a particular scheme that we want to target this location. So we can add that into that. So that, yes. And I think it's important we do that because, as I say, at the moment, it sounds a bit dark. It's kind of a free for all.
Yeah.
And so saying we do need to be a bit more targeted. Yeah, I agree.
Let's make an impact somewhere and really, change the community.
Okay, thank you. Everybody know.
You mentioned 800 declarations from 2018.
Yes.
That's not really a lot, is it? For this, we're not definitely trying to improve the area.
This is, with obviously eco, there's kind of two stages to it. So these are applicants that are not eligible for the standalone government scheme. So there will be more than the 800, but also we don't get to know about those. So yes, and I think again, it comes back to the point about publicity and also ensuring that we're targeting right people.
Okay. Any other questions? No? Right, well, somebody like to move the recommendations, please? 2.1 to 2.3. Yeah, councillor House, seconded. Councillor Petrinas, all those in favour? Thank you very much, Wendy. That's carried unanimously. Thank you. Okay, so we move on to item 11, the Hackney Parish private hire licensing policy amendments. And that's on pages 117 to 262. Half a tree.
I go through page by page.
Yes, are you sitting? Running through the report, Chair, I'll just summarise the main changes. We went out for consultation on quite a substantial amendment to the council's taxing private hire policy on a number of fronts. And that consultation gained 52 responses, which is a healthy level of response compared to the ones that we've undertaken previously to that. The main changes that we're putting forward are in respect of age limits for our vehicles. We had intended to reduce the age from 5 years to 3 years on plating a vehicle. However, many of the comments we received recognise the second-hand car market being particularly buoyant at the moment, and obviously the continued impact of COVID on some of those individuals. So there's been changes there to maintain the 5 years, but to bring in a Euro 6 emission rating for our vehicles, and when they are on renewal, that will be a requirement that we will bring into effect on the 1st of January 2026 for those, so to allow people time to adapt to that change. We changed some of the proposals for wheelchair accessibility to incentivise their uptake, and there are a number of other changes that we propose in respect of CCTV requirements, introducing technical specifications for those, introducing record keeping requirements for applicants and parties like daily checks. We had some issues surrounding maintenance and hold ties and so on. We're proposing a new policy in respect to executive hire exemptions, so exemptions from displaying plate when doing chauffeur work, and there are a number of changes that we've gone out to benchmark against other authorities, some of things like our vehicle inspection report, which has been extended and updated, and we've added paragraphs into the policy in respect of private hire conditions to make it a requirement for licensed drivers to notify us when there's an allegation that the police are investigating an offence, and that's largely because of the work of Noel Book, who's an ex-police officer, who's worked with us for, I think it's around 9 months now, and he's been doing some great enforcement work, and there's a few loopholes that we've tried to close, so that's been really useful to get his experience and to reflect some of his experience within the policy itself. So those are the main changes that we're putting forward, and members will note this never report probably will come to the next meeting whereby we're looking at driver standards, which I've kept separate.
I wonder why. Councillor Pitt, Spear, please.
Chair, I have pleasure in recommending that we approve this changes to this policy. I know a lot of hard work was done between Lee and Kate, a lot of detailed work in updating it. So I have pleasure in recommending it.
Thank you.
This recommendation.
Yeah, is there a second to all of that? Yeah, Councillor Knight. Sorry, Councillor Pearson will start, please. All those in favour, please shout. Okay,
Thank you.
there you are, got an easy ride compared to the actual report, but thank you very much indeed. Okay, right, now we come to item 13, because we've already done 12, bringing the 3 weekly collections trial to an end. So it's pages 269 to 274. So I'll take it with oh yeah, you're already here, Paul. Right. Okay, over to you then, please.
Thank you, Chair, councillors, officers. So we started our 3 weekly trial refuse collections back in 2017, 5 years ago. We selected 3,500 properties for the trial. Initially, it seemed to be having a good effect. We had all our recycling advisors out there trying to encourage recycling. Initially, it was only due to last 6 months, but it's 5 years later, we're still running it as a trial. So what we're looking to do is bring the trial to an end. We've got results from the trial, what's happened with the waste and recycling. But as a trial itself, we seem to be getting some negative feedback from the residents in the trial area, just that it's gone on for so long. So what we're looking to do is bring the trial to an end, and that will give us the opportunity to utilise the drivers and the staff and the vehicles that are used on the trial areas, bring them back into our normal weekly recycling collections. That's where we seem to be struggling at the moment, is to provide efficient recycling service, just mainly due to staffing and driver numbers. So by cancelling the trial, that will allow us extra resources to put into recycling, which should help resolve a lot of the issues that we're facing at the moment. Obviously, the benefits of the trial, we've seen those. But at the moment, we're not in a position to roll out 3 weekly across the district. And we don't have the infrastructure or the staff in place to do that. We'd need a lot of extra recycling resources to roll it out across the district. And obviously, our internal resources, the yard, the baler, all the conveyors we use is quite dated. So we are looking to do a project to upgrade all our infrastructure. And when that's done, then we'll probably be in a better position to look at 3 weekly again and see if we are in a position or if the desire is there to roll it out across the district. So what that will mean is those 3,500 customers on a 3 weekly collection will revert to fortnightly. The only negative effect on those customers is that whereas at the moment we put out unlimited recycling, they will be limited to the same as everybody else then, which is like 2 boxes, 2 bags, a caddy. But over the 5 years, the recycling output has reduced a lot on those recycling areas. So we don't get too many customers and they've got 5 or 6 boxes out. We do have hotspots, I suppose, where recycling is still very good. But on the whole, across the area, it has reduced. So that will bring all those customers from an equality point of view. Everyone in the district will be getting the same service. That will allow us the extra resources on recycling to improve the service there. Again, we'll just look at that in the future, maybe in a year's time, once we get sorted out the infrastructure in the depot, that will allow us to revisit this later on. So that's our recommendation, is to bring the trial to an end, which will allow us to use the staff on recycling. Questions?
Okay, thank you. It looks as though we're actually going against what's happening elsewhere in the county. And I have difficulty in getting my head around the idea that it's actually going to save us resources when we're actually going to do more frequent collections. But anyway, I don't know how you can answer that one.
Yeah, we do have on refuse, we have, crews that are not working every day, so we have some rounds, big 26-ton bin lorry rounds that are helping out on the rounds, getting all the domestic collections done. It's because it's 14-day cycle, they don't have 10 rounds. Monday to Friday, 2 weeks on the trot. So they might be working 5 or 6 days out of the 10, and then the rest of the time they're a spare resource. So by bringing those 3 weekly customers onto fortnightly, we will put those into the slots where that lorry is already operating. That will free up the dedicated 3 weekly crew to go on to recycling.
Councillor Pearson, thanks.
Yeah, I support this. I think the one thing that we need to be seen to be doing well is our domestic waste and recycling. And I think we've had quite a few problems on there the other this year. And if this is something that will help sort that out, just by rejigging the crews and also the rounds. I know that the rounds themselves have been, which were designed 5 years ago. Yeah. Of course, some problems as changes, more buildings, more rest. So the whole thing needs a review anyway, and is being reviewed. And I think that it makes sense at this time to be doing that. Also, 3 weekly has worked very well for certainly for East Devon. It's not being complied with across the county yet, and there are just as effective processes in other counties on a 2 weekly cycle. So it's not necessarily the right and the best thing to do, and so it should be, I think, reviewed and revisited once we've settled and sorted the rounds.
That sounds to me like you're throwing out everything that we've done there. I completely disagree. I've been part of this trial and it's made us really, as a community, and I know it's not worked everywhere before, but it's made us work really, really hard at making recycling work. I think there should be a positive commitment to getting to 3 weeks. We can survive as a family with 2/3 or half a black bin across 3 weeks because we really work hard on recycling. And I think there should be a commitment to go to 3 weeks because it does get rid of residual waste, no doubt about it. The reason it slipped back in other places is because of the lack of education out there. I accept all the argument there. I'm a bit of a doubter because it's been the longest trial since Nuremberg. But I think we should actually be more positive about it because it showed when we put the education in that it works really well. So the trial worked. And East Devon, through their huge trial in Exmouth, have proven it works and rolled it out. So I just think it's something we should be committing to, not saying, it may not be the right answer. I think that's a very negative thing. Because most of this, a lot of this batch, the rest is a lot of it is in Glens and some in Fortune Valley, but a lot of my patch is in here, and they're most of it, my patch, are very proud of what they do with it, aren't they? Well, so I think we should be more positive and say, we've got to do this. The big problem for me, and the reason I should support this, is that we haven't got the capacity in the recycling. Simple as that. Otherwise, I'd be, that, Chair. I've said all along, I would resist this and say you should be rolling the rest out. But I understand we haven't got the capacity and we've got to sort that out. And then I think we should make a commitment today that we believe that the future is the 3 weekly black bin cycle. And that will give us more resource to concentrate on recycling. And if we don't commit to that, then I'm going to struggle to vote for this. But the reason I am leaning towards it is that we haven't got the capacity, and I understand all that. Even though, I'd have to go and explain it to some of my parishes and find it, and they're already, I went to Goodley and talked about Bits and Snapper. And they all raised eyebrows, and so did Bratton Fleming when I mentioned at the last parish council meeting. So, it takes some explaining to people unless there is a commitment to spend some money and get on with the 3 week fee in the foreseeable future. So.
Right, I'm going to go to Ken first, and I've got several people wanting to come in.
Well, for me, Chair, this is quite simple, really, because we don't have the resources at the moment in the general pool of crews, and this will free up some resource. We're not in a position at the moment to move ahead with 3 weekly because of the issues in the process hall. So until we get those sorted, it is a waste of resource, if you like, keeping them on a trial that, as you say, has been ongoing for any number of years now. This is not abandoning 3 weekly. So when we are in a position to have our, when we're in a position where we've got the process all sorted out, and the rounds sorted as well, then that issue can come back to members and members can debate it and take a decision on it. It's simply trying to use the resources in the best way that we can in this intervening period until we're in that position where we can bring that back. So it's not us abandoning 3 weekly, and I think that message has to go out.
Yeah, I think that's very important. And John, you will.
Yeah, thank you, Jim. Just to add to what Ken was saying, really, there is a clear commitment. We've got 750k in the capital programme to go towards the original infrastructure changes that were planned for the process hall. We know that's likely to not be enough now. So Mark will be bringing a separate report to full council in November that sets out a plan for the process hall infrastructure and the infrastructure requirements in order to put us on that sound footing, in order then to push ahead then with further changes. So there is a clear commitment, there's a financial commitment, there's a desire in terms of moving ahead to that point. And that will be set out in a report that will come to members for council.
Thank you. Councillor James has been trying to come in for anything.
I'm getting into yeah, I can quite understand the argument Paul makes. We don't need to have underutilised large vehicles when there's rounds not being collected. And I can see that there's this problem with the recycling hall and that we need to be able to upgrade it so that we can then process even more recycling and take the limits off the amount people put on. But as people in the pilot area have got very used to a 3 week period, and as Paul mentioned, there will be some spots of very good recycling. It would be a bad idea, I think, to disenchant the best recyclers by, leaving after recycling because they've overdone it. It might be, as long as there's capacity there, be best to be able to be a bit flexible with the rules when you do it, and not just sort of, I know you have to talk to a guide and get it done appropriately, but to collect as much as possible that the whole thing, rather than, because we know we're going to come back in whatever it is, to be able to say there's going to be 3 week recycling. We don't want to got these people all geared up, then tell them not to bother, and then pack them up and then say start again because they just don't
Point taken. Mark, you wanted to come in and then Councillor Pierce.
Yeah, just to agree with you, Johnny, I don't want to, what I want to ask people that have really got the message of recycling really, really well. But I think it is probably one of the things that we shouldn't have done on the trial was allow unlimited side waste.
Yeah.
What has happened in other parts of the trial is people have gone the other way and got really, really bad at recycling and then just accumulating residual waste, which is kind of counterproductive to the trial. So this isn't a complete abandonment of the 3 week trial. We will revisit it, but I think we need to make sure that we learn from some of the things that happen with the trial and some of the things that haven't. But I think it is important if we go again later on, we actually allow those that want to recycle more to do so, and perhaps give them more containers or bigger containers. But not allow this extra sideways, which we should know worry about.
Okay, thank you. Right, Councillor Pearson and then Councillor Glenn Lang.
Now, I was not suggesting throwing out the baby with bathwater. I was more concerned about a shift in our thinking and our whole education across the country, really, in terms of the production of the stuff in the first place that needs recycling. We produce far too much to recycle, and far too much packaging that gets thrown away. So when I say review, I mean review with a view to, if you like, the Environment Bill Act, right? And what is actually happening there, because I think all of those factors will come into play by the time we get around to doing a review. To bring back 3 weekly or any other method. It could be 4 weekly by then, who knows?
Thank you. Mr. Glyn Lane and then Councillor David. Aye.
Chairman, I honestly believe it's the authorities come back to us, but quite honest with you, the original reason why they done a trial, right, is to try to make savings within this authority. And the reality is, if you're collecting it less, there's got to be a savings, surely. I mean, that's what it was all about originally, when it's savings. And I can hear about the trial area, you can put as much sideways as you like up there. They were saying we'd save the money with cardboard. Well, if you're not actually allowing people to put extra cardboard on the other end, well, it's going to go in the black bin, and it's as simple as that. But to be honest with you, I mean, the other authorities is no changing around, and I think my daughter's up in Mid-Devon, I think, and making changes up Mid-Devon. So I think personally, this authority's gone backwards. What you really need is a proper strategy about where this authority is going. And I think if we should do a proper strategy, you'll probably find we save a lot of money, because what they talked about before was saving sufficient funding from it. And if you do it properly, there's no reason why you shouldn't save now. And quite honest with you, if you've got less vehicles on the road, it's less cost in running, in saving in full costs. So quite honest with you, I think they're making the wrong move, yeah. And you know, I think really, you know, we were in a trial area where as well, and it works. It's as simple as that. There's miscollections in our areas, no twist about that, but that's down to the fact that some people don't seem to think they need to go somewhere, so they can't get in there, so they forget. But at the end of the day, if you give a proper service, it's very efficient service, it should work. You know, I think personally, I should be voting against it, because I think it's wrong. You honestly need to look at it again and come back with some costings and show us what the difference is between 3 weekly collections and 2 weekly collections. In regarding the processing law, this has been going on for years. I mean, quite honestly, why are we done with the processing law if there's an issue with the processing law? I mean, what you can just beg going out in the sand. Personally, I think you need to get on and you've allocated money in the past to deal with it, and all of a sudden you say there's an issue with processing. You know, and especially now. I mean, I think John reported last time. There's more income coming back now from recycling. Well, surely it's moving in the right direction, surely, isn't it? I don't know. I think this is making a mistake here. Go backwards. You know, I think you want to go the opposite way. You want to be moving forward. Mid-Devon's doing it. Other authorities are doing it. Why are we going backwards? I can't understand it.
Chair, I think we need to get away from thinking this is a permanent abandonment of 3 weekly. It's not. What we're saying is, can we bring the trial to an end? That we can take the learnings from the trial forward, so that when we're in a position, when the process hall is in a position to handle more recycling, is more reliable, we can then come back to members and say, we're now in a position to roll out 3 weekly or other initiatives to improve recycling. Because it was about improving recycling as much as possible. Yeah, it was the both. But we're not in that position at the moment. What we said about a year or so ago was that when we're in a position where we've had the vehicles and the fleet sorted out and the process all sorted out, then we'd be in a position to consider moving ahead with 3 weekly or other arrangements. The vehicle issue is now pretty much sorted out through the leasing arrangements. We've now got the process all to do. Once we've done that, then members can take a view as to whether to roll out 3 weekly. We're not saying we're not going to go down that road. All we're saying is, can we please bring the trial that's been going on for 5 years to an end, so that we can remove ourselves from the sort of most awkward position that we're in, which is this sort of halfway house, and put the resources into the rounds. And then when we're in a position when we've got the infrastructure sorted out, members can take a decision on 3 weekly. So it's not abandoning 3 weekly at all. I'm not saying that we will go ahead with 3 weekly. I'm not saying that we won't. It's for members to take that view when we're at that appropriate position.
Chairman, with respect, we've had 5 years of it now, and we've got it's moved in the right wrong direction.
We have had 5 years of the trial, and it's time to bring it to an end and either move forward with it once we're in a position to do so, or abandon it. What we're saying at the moment is just let's stop the trial, because running the two systems together is labour intensive. And then once we're in a position to move ahead, once we've got the infrastructure in place, then members can take that decision.
Thank you. Can I go to David first? Because it's been
My point has been negated, actually. and start my thunder. But yeah, I mean, I see it as, yeah, we are bringing it to an end, and actually we need to look at the data. We need to maybe have a meeting or two and raise some points and get more members who've got any issues or boxes or type of boxes or broken boxes. Let's not go there, but actually look at that and make a plan to move forward in the future. You know, it's just a temporary situation to actually end one thing and move towards the other.
I should come back and say, our recycling rates, when you look at the whole country, I think that, correct me if I'm wrong, about 380 district councils, we're 88, I think.
Yeah.
In the country, so we're well above. Lots of councils and authorities around the country haven't even moved to collecting food waste yet and collecting with the different streams in line with the environment. So we have actually done very, very well. What we've learned, I think, is that recycling those rounds are by far the most labour intensive. You know, compared to green and black, it's not as straightforward, much more resource heavy. So we need to get it right. As John alluded to, we have got some to set aside for payment capacity, but we used to do more work than just that. We really just like that, we should say the stuff that we want. Not all districts in Devon are going to 3 weekly. That isn't the best. As Ken says, we're not abandoning it. What we need to do is look at where we're really struggling at the moment, make sure we get on top of that, and that we can recycle efficiently. And then we go again, then we certainly revisit it. I think it still remains a long-term installation for us. But at the moment, we just have to take stock, identify where we're really struggling, and we have our problem we've got the driver shortage at the moment, we know to solve that. And it is killing us on recycling. So this, what we're doing now is really to just get back on board and concentrate on recycling, which is something that we do well when we're adequately resourced. We need to do it better, and then we will go again. But I just want to make the point, we are not by far the worst in the country. In fact, we do quite well in stuff.
One very quick thing is that the normal thing when you have a pilot is it's a set time, you have a baseline, you pick up your, you do your monitoring, and then at the end of that pilot time, you stop and evaluate and then move forward. This is a long pilot, it's about to have stopped.
Yeah, a song about what's it, the pilot, isn't it? What I'm worried about is 2.3 really, because it would sound to most people that it's completely on the shelf, isn't it? Now, I don't know if there's a way we can just tweak that wording. Because I think, I don't know, looking at colleagues, I mean, I am absolutely convinced that 3 weekly, in terms of environment, should be one of our aims, because it does reduce the amount of residual waste, no doubt about it. And I know, I mean, you've had this debate, Mark. You challenged that that's a fact, but I just, you know, I struggled because for me it's just obvious. And the other thing is it talks about the infrastructure is in place to deal with material. Could we as an S&R committee make some sort of resolution to support the resources so that it helps? I realise it's the capital programme that needs changing, but don't we need some? I mean, this committee, if it's something, should be saying the strategy is to get the processing hall up to standard to deal with it, shouldn't it?
Yeah.
So can we add that? Can we recommend that we would, to council, that we do that? That then allows me to sort of go back to my community and say, look, these resources have been supported by the strategy committee. The money's in place through the capital programme now, and then we will be working to see how to roll out the right system. And it's back.
Yeah, Chairman, we've got certainly around the capital programme. That capital programme will require increasing, and that will be a separate report that will come to you in the next council meeting in a couple of weeks' time. So that report obviously will be setting out what the infrastructure investment will be required. I think in 2.3, where you talk about revisiting the idea I think you could commit in terms of changing maybe some of that wording to evaluate 3 weekly funding collections, consent, you're evaluating the trial, as Nettie pointed out.
Yeah.
To make sure that that is the right way moving forwards, and that you're still committed. So you could change the recommendation that NDC evaluates 3 weekly black bin collections across the district when recycling rounds are fully resourced, operating satisfactorily, the infrastructure is in place. And obviously you can allude to the fact that there will be a report coming to full council in a couple of weeks' time, which sets out the capital infrastructure requirement required. So it shows members of the public that we are committed to putting the resources in place and the capital investment required to bring the process or improvement forwards.
Yes.
Yeah, I with that.
Just try that. I mean, those two amendments that John suggested, I think are on the button, except that the last one would be that SNR agree in principle, support in principle the report that back to go to council, subject to the council agreeing the details. Something like that, because it just needs to give it a bit more insurance.
Yeah. Did you go shoot as well? Any other discussion?
It is, I mean, honestly, it's easy in here to have this debate, when we understand the whole thing. Talking to some of my constituents about it, it's a real struggle. And Cliff knows it's going to be, take some selling out there.
I mean, John, I think Martin has made a comment, long-term aspiration. That don't drive me in. That's going backwards.
Well, that's why these tweaks to the recommendation, I think, happen, because we can go straight into the evaluation stage. We're going to support the thing to full council that we need the resources to bring things up to speed, and that's it. That gives us the reason, or gives me the reason that I can go with it, because it gives me the comfort that we've got the chance to have a proper debate about the 3 weekly thing and get it rolled out.
So you're happy with 2.1, you're happy with 2.2, and you're.
Those tweaks for 2.3.
Then it's 2.3, you're putting in this amendment. I'm not quite sure of the wording, that's the only thing.
You got the wording?
So instead of revisit the idea, you've got NDC evaluate 3 week black bin collections, but I don't know if I've got the other bit about supports, I thought.
We support SNR, then SNR supports the principle, the principle is for the infrastructure improvements that are required.
Infrastructure, yeah, thank you.
Okay. Is there a second for that? Yeah, that's two. Councillor Pearson. Councillor, okay.
But Paul, I think, it's important you take back to staff, we understand your issues and, we want to help support you, but, it's like, a squash between the two problems, so.
Right, anyway, we've debated this thoroughly now, so, those in favour of the wording as amended, please show. Okay, those against? That's okay. Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul.
Thank you. If I could just add to that, well, obviously there will be comms and messaging going out. It's about getting that message out to the public in the right way as well. So the team will be working closely with comms around making sure that message is very clear and it goes on.
Okay, thank you. Right, so we move on to item 14 and another very long visual error. Pages 275 to 415.
I promise my speech won't be that long. It'll be very, very short. Be disproportionate to that. Afternoon, members, So this report sets out a proposal to go back to what we had back in 2013, and that was those households on our lowest income receive 100% council tax discount. This changed back in 2013, and instead of 100% for our lowest income, we went to 80%. This has had, unfortunately, a negative effect in a few different ways. Prior to 2013, our council tax recovery rate, whereas 97.5%, we're now down to 97%. Also, our arrears, for those on the lowest income, has increased. Just to give you some figures. We currently have 520 households with current attachment to benefits totaling £127,000. We also have another 836 households awaiting attachment to their benefits. We can't actually attach those now because they already have the maximum amount coming out in deductions, and that totals just under 300,000. There is a large amount of work involved for our offices in recovering money from these lowest incomes. As you'll see on page, wait a second, to report. On the third page about what we're proposing is 100% and then further down to 20%. That income is very low for households, a single person £78 up to 192 for a couple with children. And it's clear that those people are struggling to pay any contribution towards their council tax with all the other cost of living, especially now, increasing. So what we're proposing is to move back to what we had 9 years ago and affording those on the lowest income 100% discount on their council tax. It's worth mentioning this is only for working age because pensionable age already have that 100%. So that's the main request. Just for some background information, other districts in Devon are looking at this as well. Cambridge have always had 100%. I've always had 100%. So they never changed from 100% back in 2013. And Mid and East Devon are currently in the consultation stage as well, is our understanding. So that's the main part of the report. We also are just requesting in proposal 2 and 3. This is just basically because obviously because of cost of living, certain household benefits are receiving extra payments at the moment. Both from benefits and also things like the household support fund. So what we're requesting is that extra money doesn't actually have an impact on their discount. We're not actually doing that anyway, but it's just really to rubber stamp that so people know if they get extra money from the household fund as an additional money for cost of living, that won't affect the council tax banding. Obviously happy to take any questions. Councillors.
Thank you, Sarah. Any question? No? Okay. Seems as though, go on.
Chair, not a question, Chair. It's really just to add to what Sarah said, and obviously this has gone out for consultation. As you can understand, obviously the biggest impact with an additional cost is the county council. So they have obviously responded in the papers. So on page 413, you've got their letter response to the consultation. It is obviously they're recommending that we don't go ahead with it because obviously it does have a cost impact and with their heightened budget pressures at the moment. I can understand obviously their reasoning behind that, but it's really just to reassure members that if you are minded to go for the recommended approach, as Sarah's alluded to, the aspiration is that our collection rate will increase because obviously at the moment we're struggling to collect from this cohort of council taxpayers. That's going to grow and grow as we move forwards if we continue with the existing scheme. The aim is that our collection rate would increase back to where it potentially was before the localised scheme came in. A 0.5% increase in our collection rate would actually halve the deficit that potentially would go to the county already. So an improvement in our collection rate, and it relieves the resources to then collect more money from the wider council taxpayers, will mitigate that impact on the county council. So it's really just to set that context that we have been in consultation with the county to reassure them that the aspiration is that our collection rate will increase in line with obviously the additional resources that will be deployed.
Okay, thank you for that. Yes,
Thanks for the report, and I think it's a good idea, a great idea. I mean, it's in the climate we're in at the moment, it's the most disadvantaged from all of the things that are happening. So something like this to make their life a little bit easier, it's not to be, just not to be,
So I hope you're moving.
If I'm moving it, yes, I shall be better.
Thanks for night seconding it. Okay, all those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous. Thank you very much, Sarah. Good. Okay, let's move on then to urgent decisions by the chief executive. Just a note on page 415, basically the one.
And there was another one that came round secondly, Chair, as well.
Oh, right, yeah, sorry.
So it's two.
Do you want to say anything about them? Or,
Can I ask a question?
yeah, okay.
I mean, what's the situation we've got, I think, Joey Madden, the urgent decision for the organ payment going forward, surely that can be resolved, they can know the decision for it.
Yeah, there's a difference between urgent decisions and delegated decisions. And we've just changed the system recently to make them more visible, because any decision should be apparent and visible to the public. So the organ one, for instance, that was just a decision taken under delegated powers. But it has to be advertised. It wasn't an urgent decision. The urgent decisions that are on this, are ones that are taken that would ordinarily go to committee, but have to be taken between those committee cycles. So this one in particular was the introduction of the Household Support Fund. That wouldn't have waited until this committee. And similarly, the other one was about works being undertaken to the High Street property. And again, that wouldn't wait until this committee. But yeah, the other, you'll see more of those types of decisions coming through, because it's now being dealt with through Modern Gov. And so will ping up as a decision that's been taken, rather than just being recorded in a written form, on a piece of paper in Democratic Services.
Okay. So we now then the urgent decisions. Thank you very much for your attendance. It's been rather a long meeting, but we would like to talk now that the meeting is officially closed about another issue. Thank you.